We'll continue with the education in classical India, and this is the part 2 and the final of the discussion on education. The classical Indian educational system is sometimes nostalgically described as a utopian system of teachers and students toiling together in dedicated pursuit of knowledge. There were no doubt many gurus in classical India who considered teaching a sacred duty and deemed that the spiritual merit they earn by their service reward enough for them. But the textual ideal and social reality were quite different. Indeed, the very condemnation of mercenary teachers in text indicates that such teachers were common in classical India. There are other evidences too for this. Jatakas, the Buddha Jatakas, for instance, speak of teachers favoring paying students while neglecting free students. Even though most gurus accepted the fee voluntarily offered by affluent students, and there were some who even demanded fees, it was considered highly improper for a teacher to specify any particular fees. In any case, gurus were not solely dependent on the fee paid by students, for many of them received tax-free land grants from kings. So gurus were generally held in godlike veneration in pre-modern Indian society. The teacher is the image of Brahman, states Manu. Manu, the great philosopher of Indian history. According to him, the guru and not one's father should be regarded as one's true progenitor. So in late classical times, gurus were predominantly Brahmins, and they had the sacred text as their exclusive pedagogic domain. In the Gurukula system, students generally lived with their guru, though there were also some day scholars. Ideally, living with the guru was like living in a cloister, and the Shishya's life was strictly regulated by numerous disciplinary rules. There are also detailed regulations in the text about how the guru and the Shishya, means the student, should conduct themselves in the classroom. There are numerous rules on the deportment of Shishya in Manu's law book. And Manu's law book is, is almost like sacred. Violations of disciplinary rules were usually punished by banishing the offenders from the teacher's presence and by imposing various penances on him, on the student. And in Buddhist institution, the relationship between the guru and the Shishya was ideally that of a father and a son. These were the ideals, but reality seldom matched them. Students often had complaints about their teachers, and teachers often despaired over their students. There were many instances of rogues masquerading as students, notes the 11th century Kashmiri writer Kashmendra. The Vedic school term normally began during the bright fortnight of the lunar month of Stravana, July-August, so that's the fall in modern terms, which coincided with the beginning of the monsoon season and the sprouting of herbs, and ended with 6 months later during the month of Pasha, December, January, or Magha, January, February, after which there was a break of about 6 months. Students were usually taught during daytime, but sometimes night classes were also held for the benefit of those who could not attend classes during daytime. So, in this system of education, formal education was in any case only a preparation for life. What really mattered was how one conducted one's self in life. I wish if education could turn to this angle even today. A great amount of stress was therefore laid on practical experience. Itinerant scholars during their tours often engage their peers in public debates to exchange views, to clarify their thoughts, and to flaunt their learning and skills. We do have these seminars and webinars. In rural India, let's talk about schools usually met under a tree or in a temple veranda. Probably even towns' primary schools were mostly of this kind. The most renowned of earliest centers of higher education in India was Takshila in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, which flourished for nearly 1,000 years from the middle of the first millennium BCE to the middle of the first millennium CE, Common Era, and drew students of talent or means from all over India. So Takshila had many illustrious gurus but does not seem to have any large educational institution. The city went into decline around the 4th century Common Era and was burned down by the Huns in the 5th century. Around the time that Takshila disappeared from history, the great Buddhist University of Nalanda in Bihar rose to prominence. This was the most celebrated educational institution of classical India, and students of different creeds and from many lands flocked to it for higher education. Nalanda University was probably founded in the second half of the 5th century, and it is said to have been liberally endowed by a number of kings, including Harsha. And the university also received endowments even from the kings of Southeast Asia. The 9th century king Balaputra of Java and Sumatra is known to have established a monastery there. Archaeological excavations of Nalanda reveal that the entire university complex was enclosed within high walls with watchtowers at its 4 corners, and its single entrance was fortified. There were, according to Chinese traveler Huan Song, 10,000 resident scholars at Nalanda, but this is clearly an exaggeration, for archaeological evidence shows that the university complex measured only about 488 by 244 meters, so it could not have accommodated more than 1,000 residents. This was an autonomous, self-sufficient institution. Nalanda met with all its needs with its own vast resources. The revenue of the 100-old villages that voluntarily endowed it by the state. So these 100 villages were given as an endowment by the state to run the university. Nalanda has as its insignia the Buddhist Dharma wheel flanked by 2 gazelles, and its official seal proudly proclaimed itself as Sri Nalanda Mahavihara Arya Bhikshu Samaghasya. It translates, the venerable community of monks of the great Vihara of Sri Lanka. Vihar is known as the center. The intellectual atmosphere at Nalanda was electric, and high ceremoniousness marked all activities in the university of a high standard. Thus, when Huan Song visited Nalanda, he, as a distinguished visiting scholar, was received outside the gate of the university by professors carrying standards, umbrellas, flowers, and perfumes. We welcome even almost in the same way today. Nalanda maintained stringent standards in discipline, and those who violated the monastic rules or fell below the university's academic standards were expelled. So apart from Nalanda, there were a few other major educational centers in classical India, but very little is known about them. One such center was the University of Vallabhi in Gujarat, which according to Huan Song, he is our one source, at one time rivaled Nalanda in reputation and was richly endowed by the merchant princes of the region. And another great educational center in classical India was the Buddhist monastery in Vikramshila in Bihar, and another one in the South Indian city of Kanchipuram, the Pallava capital, was another great education center of classical India. According to the Tamil classic Manimekhalai, Kanchipuram had teachers of all religious and philosophical systems, including those Ajivikas and materialists. One more major educational center in South India was the Hindu Temple College in Ayyaram in southern Tamil Nadu, which was endowed with 45 valleys of land by the Cholas king in the early 11th century. The Hindu educational institutions of which we have record are all later than the Buddhist university in Nalanda, and there is very little information about any of them. But there is an interesting inscription about religious studies in the Brahman village of Sarvanjanapura in southern Karnataka. And I quote, "In some of its streets, Brahmins were reading the Vedas, the Shastras and systems, 6 systems of philosophy," states the inscription. Every group of Brahmin was either reading the Vedas or engaged in listening to the exposition of some higher science, or carrying on ceaseless discussion on logic, or joyously reciting the Puranas, or settling the meaning of the Simritis, drama, or poetry. All the Brahmins of Sarvajanapura were devoted to study, teaching, and listening to the dictates of religion and morality. I unquote. So, along with religion, the importance was for a moral life, and that is the essence of education.